Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. This is going to probably resonate with any woman. And the topic is when your gifts get used against you, friendship, integrity, and what the research says about women wounds and why we do what we do to one another. This is such a massive topic. And I know a lot of people come at it specifically just from the patriarchy. And I am going to touch on that. I'm going to touch on a lot of research. But the whole point of this is not to call out that woman who might actually see herself in this episode. It is to just say, let's bring it up so that we can heal this once and for all. And I'm not saying Sandy K Nutrition is going to heal the world, but I do my best to do that. And that's who I am. That's why my episodes are mostly solo. I do have a few guests who can offer some great insight, but I try to come every week with unbiased research. I always like to blend science and soul. A lot of this is just me thinking about it and going, huh, I don't think I've ever heard a topic like this discussed on a podcast, and I need to cover this. Well, this is one of them. And some of the stuff that I talk about in today's episode, I've witnessed myself. And often, you kind of sit there and go, why? Why is it that I get this when I do my best to put myself out there for my friendships, for my colleagues? But I've noticed, in this space of social media for 10 years, almost 10 years, and podcasting over six, I've seen this so many times. And I'm going to name it so that we can heal it as women. That's it. That's why I'm here today. And I'm going to ask you to share this with a friend because I know that women across the world will find this really insightful. And I'm going to ask you, you're going to see a lot of times I'm going to ask you not to get triggered by it, but instead to turn inward and go, huh, I find myself doing this sometimes. I think it might be because of this. And nobody understands your reasons why, but it's really just to name it so that you can figure out your path to healing it. If you see this pattern, whether you're on the person who, often doesn't support women, or you support some women, you're selective about who you support, or you're on the receiving end where you're like, wait a minute, I've supported her so many times, but it's never reciprocated. I'm going to cover all of it. I'm going to cover reciprocity. It's such a massive topic. So please, 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 wherever you are listening, wherever you're watching, hit subscribe because I come every single week with an original topic, original research that is unbiased, and it's always passion over profit first. So I thank you. And so that you know, I am not giving any psychological, medical advice in any of my podcasts. I am a registered holistic nutritionist. I have numerous certifications, but I don't give any advice here. This is just to make the world a better place, science and soul in our wellness, really to help us age better. Okay, let's get going. So, women are biologically wired to support one another. The science on this is unambiguous. It's there. So, why do some of our most painful experiences come from other women? And this is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the research on female friendship, the psychology of shame and competitive threat. I'm going to bring in Brene Brown. Everybody knows who Brene Brown is, and the developmental science behind why some women compete instead of connect, and also why they might be selective. I find her a threat, so I'm going to compete with her, or I like her, I'm going to support her. She's not a competition for me. So, what I want you to carry into this episode, if something in a friendship causes you to lash outward, that is probably the most important moment to turn inward instead. And that's where today's conversation begins. So let's go. So, segment one, why female friendship actually is at its biological core. So, before I talk about where female friendship might break down, I think it's important that I establish what it actually is because most women were never properly taught this. Women are neurologically and biologically wired for connection. And it's not just a sentiment, and it's actually well documented science. We're wired for this. In 2000, UCLA psychologist Dr. Shelley Taylor and her team published research that fundamentally shifted how the field understood the female stress response. And this is big, especially for all you women in menopause. For decades, the dominant model was fight or flight, under threat, you attack or you run. Physiologically, that is true for everyone, but Taylor's team found something different behaviorally in women. They called it the tend and befriend response. So when stress hits, women are likely to protect those around them and reach towards social connection, particularly with other women. And it's rooted in oxytocin, that warm and fuzzy hormone, when they say it rises when you are nursing your baby, you have a rise in oxytocin. So it's the female reproductive biology. And in thousands of years of evolution, that rewarded that it actually rewarded women who gathered together, shared resources, and protected one another. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, it rises during meaningful social interaction. I just named one between women as well. So it reduces cortisol. I talk a lot about cortisol. Cortisol's not bad. It's about having elevated cortisol levels consistently where it gets out of balance. So um, oxytocin calms the nervous system. It creates feelings of trust and safety. A 2021 study published the International Journal of on the Body and Stress found that it may even have cardioprotective effects in women. So we want to keep that oxytocin going. And genuine female connection is not just about emotional nourishing, it's physiologically protective. And there's so much research on this, and midlife data is even more specific. Studies consistently show that women with strong bonds, and I'm talking about strong bonds, not large social circles that are surface. This isn't the Real Housewives, people. Okay? Big parties and all that. That's not what this is about. So these strong bonds in later life report higher personal satisfaction, lower rates of depression, and reduced cognitive decline. This is major. The landmark PLOS, medicine meta analysis reviewing 148 studies involving over 300,000 participants found that people with strong social relationships had a 50% increased likelihood of survival compared to those with weaker social ties. So women are built for this. We're designed for this. And it makes understanding what corrupts it not just interesting, but urgent. It's for our health. And I've seen so many moments of breakdown in this space of women versus women instead of women supporting women. So whether you're listening as somebody not in a public space or in a public space, another, maybe a practitioner or whatever you are, or maybe you're, a huge businesswoman, this is for you. Maybe you see this in circles of your friendships. It's a big deal because this type of connection of women with women is important for us to age better. And it's got to be the quality type of connection. So, how the system broke and what nature, uh, how the system broke, what nature built. Let's get into that. If women are biologically wired to support one another, the obvious question is why so many have experienced the opposite? The answer is not in our nature, it's in our conditioning. Research scientist Nadia Christensen introduced the concept of the patriarchal bargain. Okay, this is where I'm going to talk about the patriarchy because it is definitely a piece of this. It's just not the whole picture. That's all. This is the idea that in systems where women have historically been given very little structural power, distancing from or undermining another woman can become one of the only perceived routes to gaining a relative standing. Not because women are unkind by nature, but because a system built on scarcity quietly trains women to compete for whatever little is available. I have seen this myself in this podcasting world because now there's a ton of women who are podcasting. But when I first began, there wasn't. Remember, I started over 6 years ago. It was February 2020, even end of January. I think I recorded my first episode on my iPhone. I started Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen podcast, and now over 1.4 million downloads. And I built something wonderful that I'm proud of here. But when I first began, there were very few women podcasters in this space. And I saw this. So, a study comparing women in patriarchal versus more, feminine societies, published in Econometrica, found that the competitive dynamic between women, so common in Western culture, largely disappeared in societies where women held more structural power. The competition is not innate, it's a trained response to an unequal environment. Psychologist Joyce Benenson at Emmanuel College in Boston has researched how feminine or female competition most commonly manifests, and it rarely looks like direct confrontation. You know how, like, women by nature tend to be more passive versus calling you out on your shit. But I do believe that as we reach menopause or get closer to menopause or past menopause, we're better at calling people out on their shit. Okay. So let me see, where was I getting back to? I got to get back to that. It operates through what she describes, this is the psychologist Joyce Benenson, as veiled aggression, social exclusion, reputation management, coalition building, strategic silence. Not a raised voice. It's all about the withheld like if you're in a social space, an ignored post, a conversation had about you in rooms where you were not present. Understanding this mechanism does not excuse it, it contextualizes it. And contextualizing it is the first step toward refusing to internalize it as something that you caused. So, listening to this, you'll be like, oh, I get it. I'm going to go even deeper here. Where it starts, the developmental psychology of women who compete instead of connect. Okay, this is big. This is a lot of information, my friends, my beauties, and it's meant to help us and help us all rise together. So, this is the segment, I want to talk about this because the systemic forces are one layer. So, that's the patriarchy and systemic forces. But underneath those forces is something that's probably way more personal, maybe more clinical, and more important for understanding why specific women behave the way they do. You'll see some who are not like that at all, and some who are like that. Very territorial, very, this is my space, I own it. So there's the patriarchy. But what's the underlying cause of that? In health and wellness, they always say root cause, but it's always more than one causative factor. The answer begins in childhood. And the research on what happens to girls who grow up without secure, supportive, and consistent paternal attachment is very real research. And what I am going to say is if this is something you want to explore, you must seek guidance from a therapist who, you know, you resonate with to work with. Okay. Attachment theory, which was developed originally by British psychoanal I can't speak analyst John Bowlby and later expanded by Mary Ainsworth, is one of the most foundational and rigorously researched frameworks in developmental psychology. Anybody who's taken psych in university, maybe you know this. Its central premise is this: the quality of a child's early relationships with primary caregivers creates what Bowlby called an internal working model. It is a blueprint for how relationships work, what love looks like and feels like, whether the world is safe, whether the child herself is worthy of consistent care and attention. When a father is present, consistent, supportive, and affirming, you see a lot of this research about dads with their daughters, and really, it's not about the discipline, right? It's about the support, the love, the unconditional being there for their daughters, right? Versus, you know, mothers and daughters, how that can be, right? So it's about when the father's present, consistent, supportive, affirming, that internal working model is built on a foundation of security. So the daughter learns, I am worthy of staying for. I am worth investment. My needs matter. And then she carries that into every relationship that she forms as an adult. I'm very lucky. My dad is actually turning, I'm recording this today, but tomorrow he's going to be 89 and we celebrated. And this isn't me trying to brag, but God, am I ever lucky because he's turning 89. He's the most incredible dad you would ever have. And he didn't come from that. He didn't come from that, but he became that for me and my sister. So we're very lucky. So when a father is absent, either or critical or emotionally unavailable, or if he betrays the family, so infidelity or whatever serious betrayal there is, that internal working model that forms is built on something very different. Research published on the influence of paternal absence on women's self esteem found that the absence of unconditional positive attention and recognition from a father during childhood directly hinders the cultivation of robust self esteem in women, leading many to feel disregarded and insignificant in ways that persist well into adulthood. And like I always say, that doesn't mean that you can't heal it in adulthood. The research is clear. A daughter who is criticized instead of championed, abandoned instead of protected, grows up with a fragile core sense of her own worth. And here's where social comparison theory enters, because this is where it becomes directly relevant to how women relate to each other as adults. Okay, so this is called Bandura's social comparison theory. Individuals assess their own abilities and value by comparing themselves to others. A woman with a secure foundation of self worth can witness another woman's success and feel genuinely happy for her because another woman's achievement does not threaten her own sense of value. It exists separately from it. That's a very important thing to note because you genuinely feel happy for your best friend when they get a promotion at work and you want to celebrate her, you know? So that's important to pause there for a second. A woman whose self worth was never securely established at childhood, whose internal working model says, I'm not enough, I was not worthy staying for, I was criticized rather than celebrated, experiences something very different when she encounters a woman who is visibly capable, growing, and purposeful. So, this is why people in my space can sometimes be attacked in this social media space, because this is how we appear to people who do that kind of comparison, who don't have that robust self esteem. So, that woman's success becomes an unconscious mirror. I actually had a post about this. It's true. It's like we're this mirror. So, a reflection of everything that she was told she could not be or did not deserve indirectly. And the response is not admiration of that person who's the mirror, it's considered a threat to them. So the competition is not really with you, it's with the version of herself she was never given permission to become. You just happen to be holding the mirror. So, research from the NIH confirms this dynamic very clearly. Insecure attachment styles, whether anxious, avoidant, are consistently associated with negative beliefs about oneself, difficulty forming stable and deep emotional bonds. It's not even about the stability, it's more about the depth of these emotional bonds. And heightened mistrust. So you just don't trust anybody, you don't trust your friends, you don't trust their intentions towards you. And what researchers describe as impaired affect regulation. So, when a woman who grew up in this type of environment encounters another woman who speaks openly, who is seen, who is growing, and then she feels threatened by it, she's not operating from malice. It's not malice. She's operating from a wound that was, probably never hers to carry, not hers to carry, but has never been healed. It's called, you hear a lot about this in the social media space. There's the healed version of you and the unhealed version of you. And I think that we're always healing if we're open to receiving. We're always healing if we're open people. If we're not, if we're masking, if we're numbing, if we're really not going deep enough, then it's hard to heal. So these are survival responses from a place of deep, unresolved pain. Understanding this does not excuse the behavior, it means understanding the origin. Okay. And that's for you to work on if you see this in, whatever I'm speaking about, if you see it in yourself. So, the psychology of shame, this is where Brene Brown comes in. I'm multifaceted in my approach. And why? It always needs somewhere to go. Shame always needs a place to land. And it can be pretty ugly. And I actually talked about it with my podcast on men. Shame's a big thing. I'm going to have to talk more about that one. Now, I want to add in the shame layer because developmental wounds and systemic conditioning do not operate in isolation. It's never one reason. This is why people only talk about the patriarchy. They're missing a lot of these pieces about women and why sometimes women are the way they are. Because developmental wounds and systemic conditioning don't operate in this isolation, interaction comes in with shame. Shame interacts with them. And that's what turns private pain into public behavior. So, Dr. Brene Brown, most people know that she's a researcher from Houston. She spent over 2 decades studying shame, vulnerability, and human connection. I love her. I love her. I think she's the most authentic person who is in a public space. And in her grounded theory research, interviewing over 215 women over 4 years, she developed the shame resilience theory. Her central finding: shame is one of the most primitive emotions and one of the least examined. It operates in silence and secrecy, and its power grows in direct proportion to how unspoken it remains. The more you hide that shame, the louder it gets and grows. So, Brown draws a critical distinction between shame and guilt. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. And when a woman is already carrying a deep wound around her own worthiness, when her internal working model was built on criticism and abandonment rather than support and security, shame has especially fertile ground to grow on. And what I will say is that everybody's environment is different. We are not robots. You may have had a really, really great one parent and then not another. So how all of this affects you is very different. You have to work with somebody who gets it and who gets you to understand and get to the root of what your specific issues are. Shame, when it feels cornered, does not sit quietly and process itself. It moves and it externalizes. It looks for somewhere to go that is not inward. If you're rooted deeply in shame, you will very rarely turn inward. Brown's research is unambiguous on this. The response to unprocessed shame is almost never honest self-examination. It is almost always some form of moving toward blame, attack, exclusion, or the building of a coalition that tries to cover up the fact that shame was never the real issue. Behind all of those things, it's about the deflection, right? Wellness platforms like mine speak openly about women's health and are meant to create conditions that Brown's research identifies as genuinely healing: empathy, shared experience, and the act of being witnessed without judgment. But often we in this space can experience criticism for hitting a nerve in unhealed women. The women who comes for you because of your content, if you're out there in a social space, is not angry at you. She's angry at what your content is asking her to feel or uncover. And what it asks her to feel is something she has maybe been avoiding for a very long time. And we all do that to a point, right? Don't we? I think we do. I still do. So, I'm going to talk about tall poppy syndrome. I think this is super interesting because I'd never heard of this. What the research says about women who speak and the peers who cut them down. So, this is another area. This is where I was speaking about when you're in that public space and you're like, damn, I feel like I'm supporting everybody left, right, and center and helping other people out, but why isn't why aren't they supporting me back? But I see that they're supporting so and so, and you could see that they're supporting so and so, but not me. But I've helped them. You see, so I'm gonna actually unpack this because this happens to me or has happened to me a lot until I establish some really, really strict boundaries with myself. Boundaries are more about what you will tolerate, not, hey, I'm not allowing you to do this anymore. It's more about me. Like, I'm not going to do this anymore. You see what I'm saying? So, I want to introduce this concept that every woman with a platform or the courage to show up publicly in any capacity needs to understand. It's called tall poppy syndrome. Dr. Rumit Billen led the largest international study of its kind. It's called the Tallest Poppy Research, surveying over 4,700 women across 103 countries. Her definition is precise. Tall poppy syndrome occurs when women are attacked, resented, disliked, criticized, belittled, excluded, silenced, or cut down specifically because of their achievements and success, not despite them, it's because of them. So the findings were striking. Almost 87% of professional women reported experiencing it. So it's not just about if you're on social media, we're talking about successful professional women. Okay. And the way that it manifests are worth naming specifically because they're so often dismissed as coincidence. Oh, she's oversensitive or whatever it might be. According to the study, 77% of women had their achievements downplayed. 72% of these women were just simply left out, not confronted, not criticized openly, just quietly excluded from support, engagement, and amplification, which would help them. Instead, praise is withheld. So nobody's helping you get a step up. It's just this quiet, you know, unspoken thing that's going on. The health toll is real and documented. This is a big deal. And that's the other reason I recorded this podcast. Because this whole thing of, women against women or women not being supported in a public space, all of it, and it can be men too that do this in a professional environment, it actually has a health toll on us. That's why it has to be talked about, must be revealed in order to be healed. Women who experience this it reported increased stress at 85%, negative impact on mental health at nearly 74%, lower self-confidence at 66%, and burnout at 61%. The cumulative weight of showing up consistently and being met with strategic silence from the very peers who are watching most closely, that has such a massive, measurable physiological cost on that woman. And I can say, I get it. How many times have I sat there and gone, damn, like I'm trying to make the world a better place. I'm trying to help other people. I'm trying to do good. I don't get why I lift people up and try and help, but I'm not getting that in return. And this isn't me being a victim. It happens to a lot of women in all kinds of professional spaces, and it has real physiological impact. Here's the finding that I think might matter the most. The Tall Poppy research found that women are most likely to cut down their peers, not those far below them, not those far above them, but the women standing right beside them in the same space, the ones who feel the comparison most acutely, because when you grow, when your platform reaches further, when your voice carries, the implicit question in some rooms become, why her and not me? That question, rooted in insecure attachment and unprocessed shame, says nothing about you. It says everything about someone else's unexamined relationship with their own potential. The withholding of a like on social media, it's not neutral. The choice to consume everything and contribute nothing is not passive. It's a decision. And in the context of peers who know your work intimately, that decision has a name. It's called strategic withholding. Okay. And now on to the next one. The watcher who never engages and the one who uses what they see. So it's another big section here. I'm going to get specific now because there's two distinct patterns at play here, and they are worth separating clearly. So, research from Northeastern University found that 90% of social media users are what researchers call lurkers, consuming content consistently without publicly engaging with it. For the general population, this is generally benign. People are tired, private, absorbing without responding. And, I can definitely say, like my husband, for example, like he'll scroll through. He doesn't engage with anyone or anything. He just doesn't bother. But what I'm describing here is not general lurking. We all do that. Like we all do the lurking, we just don't bother responding. It is something that's more deliberate. It is the woman who knows you personally or maybe watches you all the time, whatever. She watches everything. She's maybe warm in person. She might engage freely with others in the social media space. Remember, it's social for a reason. We can see what other people are engaging with, what other people are doing, who's liking, who's commenting. So we see it. And we see who is specifically, consistently, strategically silent on your work alone. We're not stupid here, people. We see it. It's like that Real Housewives episode. Oh my God. It was horrible. They singled out one of the housewives, calling her a bigot because people saw that she was liking all these horrible posts. People were like, "Oh my God, she's nothing like the person that she presents herself to be." And it's true. I think people, you need to get smarter. Like, I mean, you need to know that people are seeing your engagement all over the place. Sociologist Alvin Goldner formally articulated the norm of reciprocity in 1960. Okay, this is so cool. Okay, because I know I talked about this with a friend of mine, Lisa Borden of Borden Communications. You can find her. She speaks a lot about this. And look her up. She's on social media, Lisa Borden. I love her. So, one of the most universal social principles across all human cultures is this norm of reciprocity. Hang with me because this is so important if you're on social media at all. Its premise is foundational. People who receive something of value are expected by social agreement to return something of value. Call it an energy exchange, whatever you want to call it. It underpins trust, cooperation, and the stability of all social exchange. Social media has changed this landscape entirely. People consume other people's hard work without the virtual thank you, which is a like, a comment, a share, some sort of engagement. Instead, people will consume content and they might weaponize it. They might get triggered and even get mad at you for it when you're out there doing your best. People consume without the social graces of a simple thank you. That helped me. Or if it's something that doesn't resonate with you, keep going. That person probably worked pretty hard on that content. There's a book called The Service Berry. I love this book. It's all about reciprocity. And, my dad, spoken about him now the second time, he's always said, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And this has somehow disappeared. And now people are out there trying to help. They get attacked instead, somehow. So, when this norm of reciprocity is deliberately violated, when someone consistently receives value from your work, your research, your vulnerability, your platform, and returns nothing, not even a cost free gesture as a comment or a share, but they're doing it elsewhere, they're breaking one of the most basic agreements of social exchange. And they might not even be doing it elsewhere, but maybe this podcast will actually help. You might not even think of it, but maybe it'll help you think about it. So they are taking, right? Taking and choosing not to give back. In many professional contexts, that choice is not accidental. Like I was saying, there's different situations, of course, but sometimes it's not accidental. It's that strategic withholding, which is what I mentioned. And it's rooted, as the attachment research shows, in competitive threat, the unconscious calculation that amplifying you reduces them somehow. And remember, there could be different reasons for that. Then there's also the darker version, where passive consumption becomes active collection, where someone watches your content not to learn, not to be helped, not to connect, but to gather information, to store, and wait for a moment where they have collected, and what they've collected can be brought out and used against you somehow. So the signs are not, okay, this is going to be a good one. These are the signs that you are not in a healthy friendship. And this is coming from women who know better now, including myself. At this stage of life, I'm 56. I've got enough lived experience to recognize a pattern. And the question is not how to avoid all difficulty, it's how to read what's in front of you accurately, quickly, without second guessing the instincts that you've earned. So here are the signs. This isn't a checklist. It's a series just of grounded observations from what the research and real lived experience shows. And again, remember, this is our health. At this age, I will not put myself in a position where my health is compromised anymore. And having certain relationships elevates that stress response in my body. And I'm putting my oxygen mask on first. And that actually helps me to be my best self for the people that I choose to be my best self with. So here's one, number one. You feel worse after most interactions in this friendship, not occasionally, but as a pattern. Sometimes it's coming from you. Those are the facts. Sometimes you're off and it might be coming from you. But the Health and Retirement Study, tracking nearly 13,000 adults over 50, found that relationships characterized by high strain, conflict, and one sided investment were directly associated with worse health outcomes across 35 separate measures, not just mood, blood pressure, immune function, inflammatory markers. A friendship that consistently leaves you depleted is not just a rough patch, it's a drain. So you got to ask yourself, the question to ask is, do I love this person? It is, how do I feel? Oh, sorry. The question to ask is not, do I love this person? It is, how do I feel the morning after being with her? Right? Because sometimes, what is that saying? To love someone is to set them free? I don't know. Next, you have started editing yourself. before you speak. We all have to edit ourselves. So take this with a grain of salt. You can't say whatever you want that comes to mind to a friend. But, if it's just constantly feeling like you're walking on eggshells, when you catch yourself mentally rehearsing what is and what is not safe to say around someone, when you have stopped sharing real news, real struggles, real wins, that's data for you. A friendship that requires you to manage your own authenticity is not a safe space. It is a performance space. And at this point in life, performing, it's fucking exhausting. Like, who wants to do it at my age? I don't. So it's not about you giving everyone a piece of your mind, because that's not friendship either. Okay. If you want to help somebody, you're going to give them something that is useful and actually probably pertains to you. You have to be sensitive about the information that you share with a wiser woman. You have to be careful not to overstep. However, if you're like, I can't talk about this because either I'm going to be like, let's say something happened with my podcast and someone decided to buy the rights and I'm all of a sudden doing extremely well. And I'm not just, only sitting here plugging away every single day without, you know, getting paid for it. Anyway, that's my own issue. But if I shared something like that with a friend, or let's say I didn't because I was afraid of how it would be received, sloughed off as nothing, not like I would feel guilty about doing well. That's what I'm talking about. That's the pattern. So if loyalty flows only one way, she expects your direction, your time, your support. Those expectations do not travel in both ways and both directions. Remember reciprocity. Your struggles are inconvenient. Your wins are met with subtle deflation, no acknowledgement whatsoever. I've been there a million times, like zero acknowledgement. um, or a swift change of subject. All right, yeah, that's great. Let's move on to what so and so was talking about. Research on toxic friendship dynamics consistently identifies asymmetrical reciprocity as among the most corrosive patterns, precisely because women are conditioned to extend enormous generosity before naming what is actually happening. So, conflict is handled through the group rather than directly with you. A woman with a grievance who goes to the group before she comes to you is not conflict averse. Research on feminine indirect aggression is clear on this. Going around someone rather than to them directly is a documented conflict strategy, not a conflict avoidance one. She's building a case, securing alliance before you are even aware that there's even a problem. That is not a friendship navigating difficulty, because we all have that. That is social management. And many will say that they're afraid of conflict. And conflict avoidance is very real, but it looks like silence, not like this. Like saying nothing to anyone and hoping the problem passes. That's conflict avoidance. Okay. What it does not look like is building a coalition. A woman who goes to the group first is not avoiding conflict at all. She's choosing where it happens in a space where the other person has no voice. Next one, she engages publicly with everyone except you. I have touched on this. When someone consistently interacts in your shared space, but it is specifically and consistently absent on your work, that's a pattern. That's not an oversight. Tall poppy research and the norm of reciprocity together explain precisely why. And the root could be, like I said, it could be childhood rooted, who knows? But amplifying you feels to her like she's diminishing herself. So she doesn't. She'll amplify all of those around her that don't really have that effect on her. The difference is that we're smart enough to see it. We see it. Next one. This is the last one. Your body signals it before your mind admits it. Research on somatic stress responses have found consistently that chronic relational stress registers in the body before it is consciously acknowledged. So I actually posted about this. It relates to, like, more of the spirit and soul side, that often your body, your soul knows when it's the right time to leave the room, but it sometimes takes time for the body to follow. And it's very true. Elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, lowered immunity, all of these things are actual physical reasons, right? If there is low grade dread before even seeing someone, if your shoulders tighten when her name appears on your phone, if there's quiet relief when plans fall through, your body has already made its assessment, and the only question is whether you trust it. Okay. It's not about how many, it's about how real. Okay. This is big. What this means is practically is profound. A woman who has maintained a large social circle out of habit, history, social obligation, but who feels fundamentally unseen within it, is not receiving the same biological benefits that the research describes. There's all this stuff about the blue zones and community and all of that. So her nervous system is not fooled by the appearance of friendship. And a woman who has a handful of genuinely honest, safe, reciprocal connections is receiving all of those benefits in full. Our body, you can't fool the body. The body's brilliant. The body knows. So you're not going to receive the same benefits of just these few really deep connections. A study published in Psychiatric Sciences tracked nearly 13,000 adults over 50 across 8 years and found that increases in friendship strength, not breadth, but depth, were associated with improvements across 35 separate health and well-being measures. So you do not need a large circle. You need a true one. And the research is telling you something really, really important. Your nervous system already knows the difference between real and performed connections. Can't fool your nervous system. It knows. Body always knows. All right. How to stand in your truth without apology, without drama, without losing yourself. Now, here's the practical part. I always like to give a few breadcrumbs for you to take with you and then explore it. Explore it with your practitioner, explore it with whoever, your girlfriends, whatever you need. For women who are done rehearsing conversations they never have, who are past the age of making themselves smaller in order to make other people comfortable, stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided. Just stop. I have a tendency to do that. I'm always over explaining to try and make that other person feel better instead of making myself feel better. Like, how screwed up is that? But I've now been able to name that in myself, and I've been able to stop that. So when someone has built a narrative around you, gathered her troops, established her version, no explanation offered inside that dynamic, will shift the verdict. It's not. She's not she's not even in that listening posture. Okay. She's in a confirming one. So the energy that you spend trying to justify yourself to that audience belongs to the people who are actually showing up for you. Redirect it without apology. Don't do it. Don't engage. It's tough though if you're like somehow attacked in a situation. It's hard because you're just like, what? So address it once directly, only with the person who owes you the conversation once. only once. Okay. If something has gone wrong, if your work has been misinterpreted, if your content has been used against you, there is one appropriate first move. Go directly to that person, not the group, not a mutual contact. Say plainly, something has happened. And I think that you and I need to address it directly. I would rather do this with you than around you. This is not aggression. And a lot of times women think this is aggression. It's actually dignity to do that. It's dignified. It also puts the responsibility for what follows exactly where it belongs. If she refuses that conversation, deflects, or most importantly, goes back to the same habits as before, you now have very clear information and data. It's not about your worth, it's about hers. Know the difference between a boundary and an ultimatum. A boundary is a description of what you will and will not participate in. It's not a threat, it's just information. Okay. However, I will not continue this relationship if this continues. That's an ultimatum, right? Both can be appropriate depending on your situation, but knowing which one you are stating keeps you from being dismissed as reactive when you're actually being precise. Let your consistency speak. Sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated or pushed aside or misinterpreted or ignored or used is actually not even a confrontation, especially if you see that that person is not willing to receive it. It's just to continue to show up and do the work at a highest level without seeking validation, without adjusting your output to their comfort level, and without giving the satisfaction of knowing that they affected your success. The women who need your work, who value your friendship, will find it naturally. And I found an amazing community here. Be deliberate about who gets access. This is big. Not everyone who is friendly deserves intimacy or access to you. Not everyone who consumes your work deserves context. Not everyone who asks thoughtful questions is asking in good faith. Discernment is not paranoia, it's the responsible application of everything that you have learned about people, patterns, specific ways that access can be converted into leverage. You gotta kind of protect yourself. Generosity is a value worth keeping, and generosity with your vulnerability is something that must be earned. And protecting your energy. My friend Brenda always talks about that. We must learn to not be splurting out our energy everywhere, especially if you're in a public space. Give yourself permission to not be over it yet. Research on social pain has found that the brain processes social rejection and betrayal in the same neural regions as physical pain. This is not a metaphor, it's neuroscience. A breach of trust from someone you considered a friend does not resolve on a schedule. Okay, now I'm going to actually close off. This is the last segment, and I'm going to close off. An invitation to the women on the other side of this. I want to speak now to a specific woman. She may be listening, she may not, but this needs to be said. And I'm not personally speaking to a specific woman. This is just my closing. If you've ever felt exposed by a general conversation or by a podcast, a social media post, a talk that did not name anyone or single anyone out, I want to invite you to get curious about that response before you act on it. Not because your feelings are not real, because like I actually find myself often, social media can be very triggering. I'll watch something, I'll be like, but that's not right information. And then I get like kind of self-righteous and I'm like, why do I need to prove anything? Why am I worried about that? What? And then I turn in before I act out. That's my big thing lately. So, those feelings are actually data that you feel. And when you look honestly at what that data is pointing toward, it is almost never the woman who actually was speaking. The research on attachment, on shame, on the developmental wounds that shape how women relate to one another, it is not there to excuse behavior because the behavior, facts are, can be really shit. And it can be really, really damaging to that woman's health, as I explained. So this research is there to illuminate it. And I always say, you must reveal it to heal it. And if any part of today's conversation landed close to home, if there is recognition in anything that I've described, then I want to offer you something that most people won't. Compassion and a challenge. The compassion is this: whatever happened in your history that shaped how you relate to other women, that's not your fault. I mean, our childhoods, that's not our fault. And you built the best internal model that you could with what you were given. But the challenge is this: you're no longer a child. And the patterns that protected you then are costing you in the equality of your friendships, in the real depth of your connections, in the energy you spend managing competition instead of building deep communities. And it's costing the women around you who deserve better. The bravest choice available to you is to turn the lens inward, to find a therapist, a trusted friend, a quiet hour, and ask honestly, where does this come from in me? What am I really protecting? And what would it mean to finally just put it down? That's where the growth lives. This is where genuine sisterhood becomes possible for all of us. So I'm going to leave you with this: women are built for connection. The science is unambiguous. And the version of female friendships that actually heals, that protects cognition, reduces inflammation, slows cellular aging, and feeds the soul is not built on numbers or performance or the optics of solidarity. It's redirecting your unresolved pain onto the woman around you. Okay. I've spent years building a platform on a promise of passion over profit and truth. That means talking about things that are uncomfortable, things that might land close, the things that sometimes make people recognize themselves in ways maybe they're not ready for. But that work of mine won't stop. And I would hope that every woman who is out there doing her best to help others, that they won't stop either. The listeners who needed someone to name the thing they have been carrying in silence, they are why this platform exists. In this episode, if this episode stirred anything in you today, sit with that. Not with the one who caused it, with what it revealed about you. That is the only place any of us can actually create change. Inward first, always. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next week. I appreciate you.